Somewhere in that vast emptiness, a man named Jake had found a home, or at least something like one, not in a cabin, not in a tent, but in the cold, dark hollow of an abandoned bear den. For most people, such a thought would send shivers down the spine, but for Jake, it was the first place that had truly made sense in a long time. Before we start, smash the like button and make sure to subscribe if you haven't, and hit that notification bell so that you won't miss any new stories. Jake hadn't always lived like this. Once, he'd been part of the world. Most of us know the one with rent payments, deadlines, and coffee breaks that blurred into exhaustion. But after losing his job at a sawmill during a downturn, his life began to unravel. A few missed payments turned into eviction. His truck broke down. His savings disappeared, trying to fix things that couldn't be fixed – machines, relationships, maybe even himself. He started walking north, mostly, away from cities, from noise, from people who looked but never saw him. Until one day, deep in the wilds of the Pacific Northwest, Jake stumbled upon a dark opening in the side of a rocky hill. At first, he thought it was just a hollow where rain pooled, but inside, the ground dropped, revealing a wide, shadowy chamber walls slick with moss, the air cool and still. It wasn't a cave made by people. The marks along the entrance were unmistakable scratches, old and faded, where a bear's claws once raked the stone. Most would have turned back. Jake went in. At first, he stayed just one night, seeking shelter from the rain that came sweeping down the mountain. But when he woke up dry, warm, and alive, something shifted in his mind. Maybe, he thought, this wasn't just shelter. Maybe this was survival. Over the following days, he began shaping the place into something livable. The mouth of the cave was wide enough for a bear but too open for a man who slept lightly and feared the things that moved after dark. So Jake scavenged. He found a nearby dumping site, half swallowed by weeds, and dragged back wooden pallets, old rope, and rocks. Using these, he built a makeshift door, a crude barricade lashed together and weighted with stones. It didn't look like much, but it gave him peace. When the wind howled, the door creaked but held. Inside, he arranged what few possessions he owned. A torn mattress he'd found behind a ranger station, a blanket patched with duct tape, an oil lamp fueled by leftover kerosene, its flicker bouncing shadows against the cave walls like ghosts telling stories of their own. He even found an old tin coffee pot, rusted but still usable. Every morning, he'd heat water over a small fire in the cave's corner, steam rising into the chill air as he sat listening to the forest breathe outside. Days in the wilderness aren't measured by hours but by needs: food, fire, safety, rest. Jake learned quickly. There was a stream nearby, its water cold and clear. He built a crude fishing spear from a branch and a sharpened knife, and after a few failed tries, he caught his first trout. He cooked it over a fire at dusk, the smell drawing in curious eyes from the tree line. Foxes, maybe raccoons, once even a pair of glowing eyes that watched him for an hour before vanishing silent, predatory, unblinking. He gathered berries, roots, and wild plants he'd learned to recognize from library books long before his world had fallen apart. When hikers occasionally passed by, though rare in that remote corner, he'd trade small wooden carvings for canned goods or tools. He'd always been good with his hands. Whittling became his language of barter, and soon the hikers knew him as the man in the bear cave. It wasn't pity they gave him, it was respect tinged with curiosity. At night, when the wind died and the lamp's flame grew low, Jake sometimes thought about the bear that had once lived there. He imagined it returning massive, scarred, its breath steaming in the cold, nostrils flaring as it realized someone had taken its home. But the bear never came. Locals said a hunter had killed it years ago. Others claimed it had simply moved deeper into the mountains when the logging roads cut through its territory. Either way, its presence lingered in the claw marks on the rock, in the musky scent that time hadn't quite erased, in the shape of the cave itself, round, close, protective, yet never entirely safe. Jake found comfort in that thought. He and the bear, two creatures driven by circumstance into the same cold earth, both seeking a place to endure. As autumn bled into winter, the forest grew quiet. The birds left. The stream slowed. The cold became a living thing, an enemy that crept into Jake's bones. He sealed the cave entrance tighter, stacking more rocks and layering animal hides over the gaps. He collected wood during the short daylight hours, piling it high near the fire pit. But no matter how much he burned, the warmth never lasted. The stone walls held the cold like a secret. Some nights, his breath froze in the air before him. His oil lamp guttered and went out. The silence was so heavy he could hear his own heart. Then came the snow, heavy, relentless. It sealed the cave like a tomb. Jake stayed inside for days, rationing what little food he had left. He spoke aloud to keep his mind from unraveling, sometimes to himself, sometimes to the memory of the bear. Once, he whispered to the cave itself, thanking it for holding him. When he finally ventured out, the world was transformed. White, infinite. Tracks of deer crisscrossed the snow, vanishing into fog. It was both beautiful and cruel proof that nature could nurture and destroy with the same indifferent hand. One afternoon, when the thaw began, Jake heard voices. Human voices, a rarity in that wilderness. He followed the sound cautiously and found a man and woman by the stream hikers, their backpacks heavy with gear. They stared when they saw him, this gaunt figure emerging from the trees, beard thick, eyes bright from isolation. They offered him food. He refused. They asked where he lived. He pointed uphill, to the cave. The woman's eyes widened. "You live there? In the bear den?" He nodded. She laughed softly, not unkindly. "You're tougher than most people I know." They shared coffee with him before leaving. When they were gone, Jake felt something stir inside him, something he hadn't felt in months. Connection, the reminder that there was still a world out there that saw him as more than a shadow. That night, Jake began writing. He had found an old notebook in a hiker's abandoned camp months earlier but had never used it. Now, he filled its pages by candlelight, his handwriting uneven but alive. He wrote about the first night he entered the cave, about the fear that turned into calm, about the bear's marks, the winters, the stream, and the way the forest sounded before dawn. He wrote about hunger, loneliness, and strange beauty. Over time, the journal became his map of existence, proof that his days hadn't simply vanished into the wild. In early spring, when the snow melted into rushing streams, the rangers came. They had heard about the caveman, as hikers called him. When they found Jake, he didn't resist. He just looked at them with quiet understanding, as if he'd been waiting. They told him he couldn't stay there permanently, that the cave was part of a protected wildlife area. They offered to take him to a nearby shelter to help him find work again. He didn't argue. He simply asked for one more night. That evening, Jake sat by his fire, staring at the walls that had been his home, his refuge, his confessor. He touched the stone, cold and rough, and whispered, "Thank you." When dawn came, he packed his few belongings, the blanket, the lamp, the knife, the journal, and walked down the mountain with the rangers. He didn't look back, not until he reached the tree line. From there, the cave was just a shadow on the hillside. To anyone else, it was a hole in the rock. To Jake, it had been something far more, a womb that had held him through rebirth. He didn't know what waited ahead, perhaps another job, another failure, maybe even another cave. But he walked with a steadiness that hadn't been there before. He had faced the silence of the wilderness and survived. And in that survival, he had rediscovered something many people spend their whole lives searching for, a reason to keep moving. A year later, hikers again passed the cave. The pallets were gone, scattered by weather. Moss had crept over the entrance, but deep inside, on the wall near the sleeping corner, they found something carved into the stone, words scratched by hand. "If you find this place, treat it kindly. The bear is gone, but the man lived."